Minister Hildegard Naughton, who has joined the Department of Justice now, I think 2 months, Hildegard?
That's right, yes, Jennifer. Really honoured to be part of the Justice team, a very exciting and interesting portfolio. Minister Helen McEntee has left myself and Minister Humphreys with a fine justice plan to implement. So we're working hard to do that at the moment, and working very well together with the parliamentary party and members across the country who've been really instrumental in driving this policy also.
It just goes to show the teamwork across the board of the senior Fine Gael leadership. You know, I mean, Helen just turned out so much work, so many things out before she left for maternity leave, and then of course had her lovely little baby pretty much immediately. But you know, there's so much produced and ready to be worked on, ready to be implemented. So as you say, she's left you quite a body of work.
Yes, so Helen has put a huge focus on tackling sexual, domestic and gender-based violence. And we've made great progress in government over the last 12 months. Like, for example, every Garda division now right across the country has a divisional protective services unit. So they'll have specially trained officers available for victims of domestic and sexual violence. So when they present to An Garda Síochána, that expertise will be there, which is really important to help support victims as part of that journey. Also, as you know, we've enacted COCO's law, and that will now criminalise the distribution of intimate images without consent. Also, we've published the findings of the Tom O'Malley review, and we've agreed an ambitious implementation plan to protect vulnerable witnesses in the investigation and the prosecution of sexual offences. And we've also backed that up as a government with €2.3 million funding as part of the budget to ensure that that work and that progress continues. We also carried out an audit of how responsibility for domestic, sexual and gender-based violence is segmented across government and state agencies. And this is really worthwhile. And I know you'll be talking to Ellen shortly in relation to the work that she's been doing. And we're also working on our third national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And I'll shortly be updating government in relation to the progress that has been made on that. And again, all ministers, government departments will be contributing to that all of government plan. A big priority will be on prevention and reduction of violence in the new strategy, and it will also include a national preventative strategy too. So the Department of Justice has partnered with Safe Ireland and the National Women's Council of Ireland to provide that expert support in relation to the development of this new third national strategy. So I would really encourage people to give their views and engage in relation to this third national strategy on really what are very difficult and obviously important issues, because we need to have people's input around how we tackle domestic and sexual and gender-based violence, and it's going to require an integrated approach. So there's an online survey on the second strategy, which would feed into the third strategy, and also this month there's 5 public workshops, I should say, taking place again to get people's feedback. So I would urge people to have their say and to, I suppose, help us in relation to forming policy around how we tackle this.
I think it's so much more visible now. It's so much more part, thankfully, of people's vernacular, of the conversations that they're having. COVID exposed that even more, though people working in the sector will have known this for so many years. And of course, it was a Fine Gael government that brought in the legislation in relation to coercive control and criminalising that. And I mean, you know, it's what you're saying there about the protective services units in the Gardaí. It's so important because, of course, you can intervene in the right way and you can intervene in the wrong way and put victims very much more at risk. So, I mean, I remember when Fine Gael came, you know, when after the 2020 election, that was beginning. It's wonderful to see that sort of rollout right across the country. I mean, that is huge progress, a huge victim-centre approach to policing with domestic violence. It's really, really constructive.
Yeah, and it really is about, I suppose, enabling An Garda Síochána as well, ensuring the training is in place to deal with victims and to make sure that victims are supported. And that's why we're asking for people to engage in this process. So everybody, whether you've been a victim, whether you have had a knowledge or experience in this area, we want to hear from everybody in relation to this so that we have an all of government, every state agency is involved in this, and we have the correct supports for victims, for their families, and to be best placed to be able to support them.
And that's so true for the community. As you say, people want to know how to help and how to help in the right way. Ellen, can I come to you? You've just completed with Mary Higgins a really important report there that Hildegard referenced about how services are delivered and how that's linked with policy across government and government agencies. Congratulations on it. And if I can thank you on behalf of Fine Gael for the work, I know you were doing it on behalf of the state, but it's really significant work. You've been, an activist in this field for so very long, just thank you for your work. And do you want to give us your thoughts on where the government is and what we need to be focusing now?
Unfortunately, I can't speak directly to the report because it hasn't been presented to government yet. But it was a real privilege to be engaged in that report and to have that experience with both the NGO and state agencies. And I suppose I can say that it's really important with the new strategy, that third strategy going forward, that it is a co-design between the state and the NGOs, and that's really important. I suppose when sadly, during the pandemic, we heard the horrendous experience and the horrendous rise in domestic sector and gender-based violence during the pandemic. And it wasn't just in Ireland, of course, it was worldwide. In fact, the UN Women, the United Nations entity dedicated to gender equality and the empowerment of women, they termed this escalation in violence against women as the shadow pandemic. And the problem, of course, is right across, as something we mustn't forget, it's right across the socio-economic divide. And that's really important for us to remember. I think that what Ireland has signed up, again, it was a Fine Gael government, not only in terms of the legislation, have we now a definition of consent, but we also ratified, the last government ratified the Istanbul Convention, which is the Council of Europe's Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. And its four pillars are prevention, provision of services, protection and coordination of policies. And I suppose the three words that I would use to tackle violence against women and gender equality in our society is resources, resources, resources.
Very well made, and it will, I know, be taken on by those in the Department of Justice and others right across government. Hildegard, can I go to the other parts of your work, because of course you're Minister for Civil Justice as much as on the criminal side. The price of insurance has just been a consistent issue for so many people, and I know the government has been doing so much work to try and tackle that, between addressing it with the courts, addressing it with the companies, trying to engender more competition on the finance side. But could you talk us through a bit of your work and what the Department of Justice's role is in all of this?
Yes, so as you know, the government has published the first action plan for insurance reform, and that is actions right across government again to make Ireland's insurance sector more competitive, more consumer friendly, and to support businesses and job creation. The plan has 66 different actions in order to bring down costs of insurance for consumers, for businesses, and to introduce a more competitive market, also to prevent fraud and to reduce the burden on businesses, but also community and voluntary groups and organisations who, again, are facing a lot of pressure around the cost of insurance. The biggest change within the Department of Justice in relation to addressing insurance issues has been the adoption of the new personal injury guidelines by the Judicial Council. And I want to commend former Minister for Justice Charlie Flanagan, again, Fine Gael doing this, who brought forward the Judicial Council Act. So this is really bringing in new guidelines that have been agreed and that will set out the level of damages that may be awarded or assessed in respect of personal injuries. So the guidelines reduce award levels for most categories of personal injuries. They'll be used by both PIAB, which is the Personal Injuries Assessment Board, and the courts as part of their assessment of compensations in these claims. So the commencement of that personal injuries guidelines, that was a key commitment as part of the Justice 2021 plan. So it should reduce costs and in time boost competition in the Irish insurance market. A second major action delivered within the Department of Justice is the Perjury and Related Offences Bill, which has now been enacted by the Gael and the Seanad. So this will introduce significant penalties for perjury-related offences. And there will be enhanced cooperation between An Garda Síochána and the insurance companies in order to combat insurance fraud. And that's really important. So these guidelines are going to send a really clear message to potential abusers of court time, of the process, that making deliberately false statements in legal or other proceedings will not go unpunished, and that it may result in very serious consequences for those individuals concerned. And I'm confident that this bill will go a long way to deterring those who may be considering providing dishonest evidence or to mislead proceedings. And also, as we know, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar chairs a subcommittee on insurance, and I also sit on that, and we'll be meeting in the coming weeks to assess the progress around this. So I'm determined to push those reforms during my time within the Department of Justice.
And tell us then about the justice system more generally. Access to justice is always an issue for people who are trying in family law and a whole range of different issues. What are the broad plans for improving access to justice and modernising the court system generally?
Yeah, one of the 5 goals in the Justice 2021 plan is to modernise the court system and to improve access to justice. So the court service itself sets out a really ambitious plan to modernise the courts and bring them into the modern age. We have the implementation also of the Peter Kelly review that will represent the most significant reforms to the courts in 100 years. So really important measures coming in place there. The review group, the Peter Kelly review, made over 90 recommendations in order to make the civil justice system more efficient and easier for people to access. And I'll be bringing forward an implementation plan on that really soon. We also want to significantly improve the experience of families who are going through the court system or the legal system to make it more family friendly, more efficient, less adversarial, putting in place supports for families that maybe might not exist at the moment or need to be developed. And again, we're listening to families, want to hear from people who have had those interactions with the court system, with the legal proceedings, so that we can better support them. And put families really at the centre of our activities, and to establish a new family court, combined with developing other areas like specialist supports for families, alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and to really streamline the family court process to make them more efficient and user friendly. And just finally, in relation to professional legal education, we want to remove barriers for people who want to become solicitors or barristers and really open up. We talk about diversity in a wide range of areas. We need to make sure that we're doing this within the legal system as well, and looking at diversity across the justice sector, including within the Department of Justice itself, An Garda Síochána, the courts and the legal profession. So a lot of reforms happening within the justice portfolio.
There's a lot of work there. There always is in justice, but particularly now, there's so much reform work going on, and so important in family law. I think every single person on this call and every public representative will know so many families who have struggled in the family law process. And of course, we know that domestic abuse can follow its way through the family court processes too. So we have to always be vigilant about that. But I'm going to move to our first motion from the Laois Offaly Constituency Executive, and our proposer is Molly Buckley, that this Ard Fheis calls on the Ministry to make resources available to develop emergency accommodation and refuges for victims of domestic violence across the country, in line with the Istanbul Convention, which states that a country should have one place per 10,000 of population. And I might ask Molly to speak to that, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm delighted to speak to this motion, and well done to everyone involved in the Ard Fheis, from our leader to all the technical staff. It's been a great experience. And before I just speak to the motion, I want to say we got great support in the whole area of domestic abuse in Offaly, in Laois Offaly, from our own TD, Charlie Flanagan, over the years, continued always giving support to everyone. And I'm delighted to put this motion to the Ard Fheis on behalf of the Laois Offaly constituency. So the lack of safe emergency accommodation for victims of domestic abuse is a national concern, and is getting the the attention it deserves. However, the situation for rural women and children in need of safety is exacerbated by the challenges of rural Ireland. Isolation and the limited capacity of a refuge, lack of public transport, the dangers presented when women flee their violent partners. So in addition to the provision of additional refuge spaces, we're proposing that a safe house is also a very good option. And this is about trying to find a way to give women and children a safe, nourishing environment where they would stay temporarily. A safe house differs from a refuge where multiple women and their children share communal cooking and bathroom facilities. In a safe house, the women and her children use the house as they would a family home. The idea is to create a nurturing, homely space, which still is safe and incredibly secure. The safe house model allows clients to step back and receive life-saving support from a specialised service and help them to proceed with their experience and out of domestic abuse. In Offaly Domestic Violence Support Service, we're currently working with Offaly County Council and TUSLA to examine the provision of a safe house project in County Offaly. At present, there is no emergency accommodation in Offaly for any victim escaping a violent relationship, and only 2 units in the whole of the Midlands in Athlone Esker House Refuge. Currently, 5 counties have no options to provide safe accommodation to families. And again, as I said, the safe house model provides a safe place for the victim and where they can get practical support and emotional support. The duration of stay would be anything from a week to 12 weeks. During that time, the woman and her children is supported in reviewing options, receiving respite from the trauma, and engages with frontline services, and then would eventually move on to private rented accommodation or social housing with support. And I mean, everything that Ellen has said about domestic abuse and during COVID would have been experienced in Offaly and indeed throughout the country. And the whole issue of the Istanbul Convention, where there should be one place for every 10,000 of the population, and that's anything, and right throughout the country, there's a need for a lot of work to be done. So I put this motion to the Ard Fheis, and I hope you'll support it. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Molly. And also speaking to this motion, we have Annette Kent, Chair of Dún Laoghaire Fine Gael in my own area.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm very pleased to second this motion on behalf of the Fine Gael Women's Network and as chairperson here for Fine Gael and Dún Laoghaire. You know, the numbers that are talked about in terms of domestic violence are very startling. And I think even more startling is the number of people, women and men affected. So 1 in 4 women and 1 in 20 men are victims of domestic violence. It is clear that there is a need for domestic violence services. And now more so than ever, it's critical. The importance of these services to society and to the humans are at the core of this dreadful experience is unquestionable. It's imperative that there's also sufficient capacity, that all the service providers are operating at an optimal level, providing focused support, designed with standards and with consistency across the touch points for those individuals, leading to outcomes which not just meet but exceed the expectations of those that need to avail of it. With compassion, I call on Fine Gael to affirm the role of the state in offering that helping hand to those that need it. This motion certainly gives the party a clear task to recognise and deal with the situation of domestic violence now as we emerge from the global pandemic, but is also to support those who, to no fault of their own, find themselves in this situation. So I'm very happy to second this motion on behalf of the groups that I've already mentioned. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you very much. And also speaking to this important motion is Katrina Bolger. Katrina.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Ministers, Chairperson and fellow party members. I'm speaking on behalf of the Carlow Kilkenny constituency and Fine Gael Women's Network. We back Molly, we back Annette. We are encouraged to see the support for this motion across our party's branches. We do wish to acknowledge Ministers McEntee, Humphreys and Naughton on their commitment to this topic. We are asking that you, our party members, get behind this dynamic department and show your committed support to ensuring meaningful change in this area. History has told us incremental change, it doesn't deliver at the scale and the pace that is now required by both the Citizens' Assembly and the Monona Hearing. This area of grave inequality, it has rooted itself into all sectors of our society, as our colleague Ellen O'Malley Dunlop just said. And we really must remember the words of our party colleague Maria Walsh when she said on Wednesday evening, now it is not the time to sit in rooms where you can see equality not present. We are calling on you, build on the work of the current No Excuses campaign and acknowledge that enough really is enough and vote yes for this critical motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina. I know which way I'm voting for sure, and I think it's a really important motion considered by this Ardèche. I think it's a motion that reflects the work and the seriousness with which Fine Gael and everybody associated with Fine Gael takes this issue. The work not just of this government and Minister McEntee and Minister Humphreys and Minister Naughton, but of their predecessors, the Fine Gael ministers behind this for so long. So I am asking you now to vote, and I will come back to you with the result when they give it to me, which apparently takes a couple of minutes. But if you don't mind voting away, I'll give you 2 seconds to do that, and then we're going to move on to the next section, okay? So vote, please. Right. So now could I introduce the very excellent Minister for Justice and Minister for Social Protection and Rural and Community Development, the Minister with not one but 2 budgets to organise in Budget 2022 at this stage, 2 big budgets as well. So a fine body of work for Minister Heather Humphreys, and we are delighted to have her and her precious time and contribution here at the Ardèche this afternoon. So you're so welcome, Heather. Although we saw each other out this morning in Dublin Bay South, I've got my sticker. Have you still got yours?
Sorry. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, we had a good morning this morning with James Gagan, our candidate in the by-election, and it's great to see so many out supporting James, and I'd encourage anybody that has an opportunity to go up get in contact with the organisers, get out there on the pavements and knock on the doors. It's great to be back out again. So we had a good morning, Jennifer, and thank you for your introduction. And I'm delighted, of course, to serve as Minister for Justice while Helen is taking her maternity leave. And can I just say that I would like to formally wish Helen once again and Paul heartiest congratulations on the birth of their son Michael Shane. I saw a photograph, I think yesterday or the day before, and he's coming along well. He's a fine little fellow, and I really do hope that Helen gets an opportunity to enjoy this very, very special time with her young son. And I have to say, I became a first-time grandparent earlier in the year. So it sort of brought me back as to how important it is that parents should have time to spend with their newborn baby. So it's an absolute pleasure for me, and indeed with the help of Hildegard here, to fly the flag in justice while Helen is off on maternity leave. And indeed, she left us a good strong work plan to stick to. So we don't want to let her down when she's off. So we'll have the work, the desk cleared the way she left it. Well, she left us a good plan now, in fairness to her. There's a whole load of actions we have to get done between now and her return, and we're working hard on that. So thanks for your introduction, Jennifer.
Oh, well, that's great. You know, on Wednesday night in the equality session, we gave Helen a sort of a virtual high five and round of applause and everything, and absolutely brilliant from an equality perspective to see a woman taking her maternity leave, and thank you to you and Hildegard for stepping up and enabling that. So it's marvellous. But she did leave you a big chunk of work, and most importantly the justice plan. You've been there for 2 months now, Heather. What can you tell us your perspective coming into the department new? What do you see as being the most important elements of the justice plan, and indeed your work in the Department of Justice?
Yeah, well, one of the main goals of the Justice Plan is to tackle crime, to enhance national security and transform policing. The Justice Plan also has the safety of our community at heart. And we in Fine Gael always ensure that the members of An Garda Síochána, that they have the tools at their disposal to tackle crime and subversives in order to protect our state and our people. And that's our number one priority: protect the state, protect the people. And next week I'll be bringing a motion to the Dáil to renew the Offences Against the State Act. And as I have said publicly this week, a vote in favour of that is a vote against subversives, and it's a vote against organised crime. And I do hope that all the parties in the Dáil will vote in support of that. So just this past week, I published the general scheme of a new Garda Síochána powers bill. It'll ensure that the Garda Síochána are equipped to investigate offences such as economic crime and heinous crimes of abuse. And we know that the criminals are using very modern techniques and all that they can find to attack our citizens and indeed the state itself. So the Garda Síochána must have the powers to tackle crime in what we have now as a new digital era, a modern era. So they need to have the powers to tackle the crime from every aspect that they can. So some of the reforms, such as allowing Gardaí with a search warrant request passwords for digital devices, and they have indeed been called upon by bodies such as the Law Reform Commission, the Garda Inspectorate and the Hamilton Group, which very clearly outlined how we could strengthen our laws and structures to tackle economic crime and corruption. And I know some people have raised concerns around the Gardaí's ability to get your password. Well, they don't ask for your password except it's on foot of a warrant, a search warrant. And search warrants are obtained in the main by going to the district court and requesting search warrants. So it's important for people to understand that with these instances such as child abuse, for example, there's a lot of that takes place online, and it leads to some awful things. So the guards really do need to have these extra powers at their disposal, so they can deal with the modern criminal who are using all of these different techniques and different devices and different methods to commit crimes. But I also like to say that the bill will also contain very strong safeguards and protections to respect and indeed uphold the rights of the individuals and the rights of citizens. So we're publishing the legislation to increase the maximum sentence also for those convicted of the crime of conspiracy to murder from 10 years to life. And the organised crime gangs who try to inflict misery on our streets and in our communities will know that we will stop at nothing to put them out of business. So we in Fine Gael will take all the necessary action to stop the thugs, bring them to justice, and prevent them from leading our young people into a life of crime. Okay, sorry, now I'll hand back to you there, Jennifer.
No, I mean, it's such an important body of work. And I mean, I have heard concerns expressed in relation to the Garda Powers Bill, but you've answered it for me there. So you're saying the search warrants are in foot of a district court decision to give search warrants. I mean, these are the appropriate safeguards that are there. But what we forget is the scale of the crimes that can be committed via phone, whether it's child abuse material, whether it's the sort of cyber attacks that we've seen and how all of that is facilitated. So sometimes we forget really quite how severe the criminal activity on that can be. So as long as it's proportionate and balanced, is that the main thing, Heather?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right there. It's about finding that balance, and we want to protect the rights of individuals and their privacy, but at the same time, the guards need those powers to deal with the criminals, because they are using every possible device or every possible avenue that they can find to commit crimes. And as I said, we have the broad scheme as the bill now, We're going to be bringing it through the houses of the Oireachtas, through the Dáil and through the Shannon, and it will be debated at length. And I'm happy to hear, people's concerns and views at that time. But we have to remember too what our overall aim here is to beat the criminal, and that's what we want to achieve at the end of the day, and stop this crime.
Can I ask you a little bit more about what you're talking about there about young people and keeping them from being involved in criminality or becoming into patterns of criminality? Obviously, the Garda Youth Diversion Office comes, under your rubric, in albeit in a distant way through Garda Síochána, but it's a core part of the crime prevention strategy. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how children you might have seen what the patterns are from Garda Síochána about exploitation of children in criminal offences?
Yeah, well, we have to, as you know, tackle crime in a number of different ways, and we have to be, we have to have tough sentences that's going to hit the gangs, and then try when they try to commit crimes such as conspiracy to murder. And secondly, we must punish those criminals who try to recruit younger people into a life of crime. We have to really break that link between criminal gangs and the young people that they are trying to recruit. And we don't want to see crime passing down from one generation to the next. And that's why we are outlawing the grooming of children into a life of crime. And for the first time, we're legislating to make it a specific offence for an adult to compel, coerce, induce, or invite a child to engage in criminal activity. At the moment, an adult who causes or uses a child to commit crime can generally be found guilty as the principal offender. And what this means is the adult can be punished as though they committed the crime themselves. So I think that's a very important change there. But it does not recognise the harm done to a child by drawing them into a world of criminality. So that's what we want to change. And now under our law, the adult can be prosecuted for the crime itself and also for coercing the child to commit a crime. So we have to be tough and show the criminals that not only will we stop them from committing the most serious crimes, but we'll stop them from dragging vulnerable young people down the path of criminality.
Could I bring Councillor Daniel Butler in on this, please, if you don't mind? Would love to hear your perspective on this. I know you've worked in social justice for so long. To get your perspective would be great.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I think that this particular piece of work around legislation around exploitation of children is hugely significant, and it's not to be underestimated. And I think the ministers are to be hugely complimented in taking this one on and acting so quickly on it. I suppose I have to give a shout out to University of Limerick and the Greentown Project, where a lot of this kind of concepts are emerging, and they're doing a lot of work here in Limerick around that particular subject matter. But certainly here, as a drug worker myself in Limerick and working particularly with young people, one of the key issues that has been emerging over the last 5 years is the exploitation of children, it's particularly ages ranging from 8 to 12 years of age, where we're seeing huge levels of antisocial activity that often is actually a distraction tactic while other activities happen elsewhere in areas. And, we're exploiting vulnerable young people, and the consequences of that exploitation for the long-term outcomes for those young people are hugely significant. And this legislation addresses that. While we have law there at the moment where perpetrators can be prosecuted for the crime itself, what this act does, it goes further. It acknowledges the impact it has on the young people, and I think that's hugely significant for us. And it's going to be a huge, hugely powerful tool for community Gardaí in particular, who are struggling to deal with the issue of young people being used in this way to address this head on. So I think this is a fantastic piece of work, and again shows responsiveness of Fine Gael in relation to matters that are emerging, that we do act quickly, we act effectively, and we target our legislation so that it has the maximum effect.
It's so important, as you say, because you have this sort of push-pull dynamic. The state is trying to push children out of the criminal justice system so as not to get them caught up in a loop, and you have this other tension pulling them in at an earlier and earlier age. So this work is an opportunity to try and break some of that and really give community Gardaí and juvenile liaison officers a bit more power.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, we have to acknowledge as well is that under the Fine Gael government, we see increase in budgets like under the UBU through the Department of Children and Youth Affairs that is, supporting youth projects across the country to develop relationships with young people and to draw them away from criminal activity as well. So it's not just where we're going to stick, but we're also looking at to affect change through meaningful engagement with young people at a very, very early age, at early intervention stage, and looking at prevention rather than cure as well. So it's a multi-dimensional approach that we're seeing across the country. And like you say, there is that push-pull reality, and there is that peer-led reality as well, when young people are seeing other young people with plenty of cash in their pocket, with new shoes, new clothes, being exploited. And often for many young people, it's often seen as the only way out of their reality. So this work will have huge consequences and will benefit outcomes for young people into the future.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to ask you about that today. And thank you for all your work on that in Limerick. I'm going to go to the next motion. But before I do, the result of the previous one was that it was passed by a stomping 97.3%. So that is just really lovely. So big high five, Chairman. Thank you very much. Now, the next one. Right. This is proposed by the Dublin Fingal Constituency Executive. And instead of me reading it out, I'm going to ask Clodagh Murray to read it out, please, and speak to it, please. Where are you, Clodagh? There you are.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. So our motion is that this Ard Fheis acknowledges the harm caused by conversion therapy to young LGBT plus people, recognises the work of the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition, reaffirms the commitment made in the programme for government to legislate to ban the practice of conversion therapy, and calls on Fine Gael and government to immediately bring forward the legislation as a matter of urgent priority. Ministers, panellists and delegates, I'm glad to propose this motion on behalf of the Dublin Fingal Constituency Executive, particularly now during Pride Month. In the past decade, Ireland has made great progress in recognising the rights of LGBT plus people. We voted in favour of marriage equality in 2015 and passed the Gender Recognition Act into law in the same year. So like a lot of other people, I was genuinely shocked to learn a couple of months ago that conversion therapy is still legal in Ireland. For anyone who's not familiar with this practice, what we're talking about here is a form of so-called therapy which seeks to tell an LGBT plus person, which is very often a young person who's already experiencing a lack of acceptance from their family, that they are not in fact lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgender. This can be hugely damaging, particularly at such a vulnerable age. The Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition is an all-island group which has done incredible work campaigning to ban this practice. It includes members of Fine Gael and YFG, along with members of almost every other party on this island. A recent survey that was carried out by Belong To on LGBTI plus life in lockdown found that 97% of the young LGBTI plus community are struggling with anxiety, stress or depression. 56% said that they are not fully accepted by their family. And many respondents said that this contributed more to their struggles with mental health as a result. It's been shown over and over again in studies that LGBT plus young people who are accepted by their parents and their family experience better outcomes, better mental health and lower rates of suicide. The opposite is true for those who experience rejection from their families. A study by Dr. Caitlin Ryan, for example, found that young people who experienced high levels of family rejection were 8 times more likely to report having attempted suicide and nearly 6 times more likely to report high levels of depression. Our young people need and deserve acceptance and support, not rejection. Conversion therapy does not work, and it's a hugely outdated practice, but it can cause serious long-term harm by telling a person that who they are or who they love is wrong and forcing them to repress a core part of their identity. The American Psychiatric Association has noted that the risks of so-called conversion therapy include depression, anxiety, and self-destructive behaviour, and that there is no published scientific evidence indicating that it is effective in changing sexual orientation. The same has also been observed by the World Psychiatric Association. As we've seen with the Anti-Conversion Therapy Coalition, though there is strong cross-party support for banning this practice, the commitment has been made in the programme for government, and the Minister for Children, Roderick O'Gorman, is seeking to act on that. With this motion, we are calling on Fine Gael and government to act on this urgently by bringing forward the relevant legislation as soon as possible. We know that the support is there to do it. The longer this practice continues, the more people it will harm, and we need to put an end to it sooner rather than later to prevent that. So I'd urge you to support this motion today. Gur míle maith.
Thank you, Clodagh. Thank you for speaking to such an important motion. As spokesperson for Fine Gael on equality, I've been speaking to Belong To about this all the way through. I mean, this is part of the programme for government, but the urgency around it is important because even just symbolically, the idea of asking somebody or trying to convince somebody to be other than they are for anyone in any part of their life or their identity is just is so deeply wrong, and it is part of the programme for government. But can I just ask Heather and Hildegard their perspectives on this in particular? What's the sense in government, and where are we on this important work?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. If I might, sorry, did you? Will I come in there on that?
Please.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Clodagh, for bringing forward this motion. It's really important, and I think you really stated really clearly and obviously in relation to the need that this needs to be changed. As Clodagh has said, Minister O'Gorman is working on this, and I know that the Department of Children are preparing a scoping paper in relation to this issue. And he'll be bringing forward a proposal as well that it'll be coming from the Department of Health in relation to this. So really, as you have said as well, Jennifer, this is about people's identity, being who you are, feeling safe, feeling that you're being supported and that the state is supporting you. We've done so much in relation to dealing with LGBTQI issues, and to really, I suppose, know that something like this is still legal in Ireland is just something that we have to deal with as a matter of urgency in government. And I think, Fine Gael in government will be leading on this issue as well. So I would be hoping that we'll get those proposals as quickly as possible and make progress on what is in the programme for government.
Thank you. Heather, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Carol or Clodagh, for bringing forward this motion. You're absolutely right here. We need to stop this practice, and the legislation is being prepared that it would end. It's wrong, and it's also it needs to end as quickly as possible. Is really what I want to say. Hildegard has covered, what we're doing here, and I know that the LGBTI National Youth Strategy 2018 to 2021, it contains a commitment to prohibit the promotion or the practice of conversion therapy by health professionals in Ireland. And it also commits to ensuring that the practice of conversion therapy in Ireland is investigated and followed up with appropriate countermeasures. So what we need to do is we need to stop this practice, and we need to do it as soon as possible. So thanks for that, Jennifer, and thank you, Clodagh.
Thank you, Heather. And Fine Gael, as we said on Wednesday, equality is absolutely core to our very being, and in every part of Fine Gael. Fine Gael, it's up on the wall in our rooms. It's essential to what we do, and it's essential that we support it in every way. So I'm gonna let that one go to a vote. You vote, and I will go back to some of the questions asked earlier, just to acknowledge some of the questions, some of which have been answered already by Heather in particular. There was one in relation from Mary Thompson of Dunleary. Hello, Mary. In relation to the Garda Síochána Powers Bill, and I think Heather answered that as part of her contribution, which is great. Ted Leddy out in Castleknock was asking about petty crime in Ireland, and some people with multiple convictions, up to 50 convictions, who have never really been punished, and whether that's fair on the law-abiding majority. And could I just link that to something else quickly, Heather, please, which is about is there a specific policing plan, or is there specific to tackle what seem to be rising levels of hate crime against people of Asian descent in Ireland and Dublin? This is not the first time this has been mentioned to me at all, and in fact I had an issue with it in my own constituency. I know the hate crime legislation has been published in draft form by the Department of Justice. Could you just talk to us about that, please?
Yes, we have done that. We have published that, and I think it's important that we bring transparency in terms of when the Garda Síochána are stopping people, and we that's why the new powers that we're bringing through will mean that if people are stopped and for the searching and such actions by the Garda Síochána, that it's recorded now, and that's part of the new policing bill, that those stop and search incidents will be all recorded, and I think that'll bring a transparency to it, and I think it's important that they are recorded, so therefore we can see very clearly that that there's no particular section of our society being unfairly targeted. So that's involved in that. In terms of you know, what we're trying to do, also just to say that we're making the Garda Síochána a world-class policing service. There's a lot of changes taking place there, and there's a lot of work underway within the Department of Justice. As we know, the Commission on the future of policing in Ireland has made many recommendations, and we're taking forward these recommendations, and we're making many landmark reforms in the draft legislation we approved in Cabinet in the recent weeks. And at its core is the importance of ensuring that every community in Ireland has the right to be safe, and importantly, so that they will feel safe. So the new law will recognise the safety of communities, and we have to recognise it doesn't all rest with a Garda Síochána. There are a lot more players in this field. There are the people themselves, the residents and the communities themselves, the community representatives. There's also we're going to see more engagement through the community safety partnerships that we're going to set up in every local authority area in the country. And the partnership will bring together the residents, the community representatives, the business interests, the councillors, the local authorities, and the state services such as the Garda Síochána, TUSLA and HSE to develop and implement local community safety plans. And I think that's important. We need more engagement with communities, and I think that will lead to a greater level of safety in our communities across the country.
Thanks so much, Heather. Now I'm going to kick along to the next motion, please, proposed by Alice O'Donnell and from the Fine Gael Women's Network, and I'll let you speak to that motion, please, Alice.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and hello to everybody. So I'm Alice O'Donnell, Wicklow Constituency Chair and member of the Fine Gael Women's Network. I'm delighted to propose this motion on behalf of the Women's Network and also a number of other branches who have also supported it. As you'll see, the motion calls for quick review and implementation of the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly on gender equality. The final report of that assembly contains 45 practical and considered recommendations covering areas such as the Constitution, politics and leadership, caregiving and childcare, domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, pay and the workplace, and also social protection. The Fine Gael Women's Network held a workshop recently with the chair of the Assembly, Catherine Day, and she talked us through the process involved, and it was a really engaging session. I think that we were all struck by the work done in a voluntary capacity by those 100 citizens, and also on the high level of agreement on the recommendations. And I'd like to say thank you to those citizens on behalf of all of us. Gender inequality is a problem which persists in Irish society. We only have to look at the poor representation of women in elected office, on state and company boards, and to the gender pay gap which continues to endure to see that problem. Gender inequality has been both highlighted and further compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. Research tells us that women and men bring different skills and perspective to the workplace. Studies show that the financial performance of firms improves with more gender equal corporate boards, and indeed our workplaces benefit from all types of diversity. Addressing gender inequality in our society will have many advantages. Research demonstrates the positive impact of gender balance on business profits, GDP, productivity and salaries, as well as the increase in the talent pool of workers. In fact, the economic loss owing to the gender employment gap in Europe amounts to about 370 billion euros per annum. Now, aside from the financial benefits which addressing gender inequality will have, at its most basic, it's surely the very least that all of our citizens should expect. And it also accords with one of Fine Gael's key values, that of equality of opportunity. Fine Gael has always shown itself to be a driver of social change. From our early years, campaigners like Monica Barnes and Nuala Fennell worked towards gender equality. We've done a lot as a party, but we have a long way to go. To quote the renowned computer scientist, Dr. Grace Hopper, the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, We've always done it this way. Let's aim for a Fine Gael that can do things in a different way to encourage and include and value all of our citizens. The Citizens' Assembly gave voice to the hope of 100 of our citizens. It's now time to take action to make those hopes reality. As the Irish saying goes, "Tú smá leath na hibre." Fellow members, we're only halfway there. Let's get this done. Garav Mila Mahagwith.
Thank you so much, Alice, and congratulations on all your work with the Fine Gael Women's Network, and to everybody in that. It's been a hugely active powerhouse within Fine Gael in the last while. Everybody who's been at that and participated will know exactly what I'm talking about. So thank you for that. And could I ask Ellen to come in on this motion also, please?
Yeah, I'm delighted actually with all that Alice has covered in that. And I also want to first of all commend the last Fine Gael government for the brave step it took in not having a referendum to delete the Article 41(2) from the Constitution. Instead, it listened to those who were working in the field and the front line for the need for a broader discussion that followed through with the commitment to hold the Citizens' Assembly on gender equality, which was so ably led, as Alice has said, by Catherine Day, and that meeting with her was so informative. So now, as a consequence, we have an excellent considered report with the 45 recommendations that will inform the appropriate replacement language for a referendum on Article 42 and other relevant articles that will need to be changed. So I think it is. It makes the recommendations make practical and considerable recommendations in the important areas of caring, childcare, pay and social protection. And the Citizens' Assembly also considered, as we talked earlier, the concerning areas of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence and the role that technology and the media play in these issues. It has made worthy recommendations in an effort to address these alarming issues. And it also called for the empowered and adequately resourced statutory body to be responsible for cross-government coordination. And I think this is really important. And I'm very pleased that, to welcome the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly and recognise the work of the citizens and the chair herself, Catherine Day.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you so much. And of course, it was a huge privilege for everybody in the Fine Gael Women's Network to have Catherine Day come and talk to us and to talk through her experience of the report, her experience in the Commission and the recommendations of the report. So that was wonderful. So I'm going to let that go to a vote. Please vote. And just to update you on motion 2 in relation to banning conversion therapy, a resounding 87.9% voting yes. So thank you, Clodagh, for your motion, and thank you to everybody who participated in that vote. That's great. So I'm going to go to the next one. And motion 8.4 is from the Ballyshannon branch and from Sligo Leitrim, and I'm going to ask Brendan Travers, please, to introduce the motion and speak to it.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. This Ard calls on the government to urgently introduce a gambling control bill and to appoint a well-resourced gambling regulator. Delegates, ministers, councillors, speaking to you here from Ballyshannon in South Donegal. I'm the PRO of our branch. We're part of the Sligo Leitrim constituency, well represented by Minister Frankie Feehan. Gambling, I think it is an issue, we all know that. We do believe that 64% of people socially gamble. I think this motion wants to deal with the problematic gamblers. Of that cohort, we do believe that 29% are in the category of problematic gambling. It is estimated that there are nearly 30,000 people in Ireland with a gambling problem. This has serious implications on physical, mental health. It leads to homelessness, joblessness, and other many societal issues. 1 in 10 third-level students have a gambling problem. I think that is very serious, and our party needs to address. It's so easy to bet on your mobile phone, and I think that when you look at with the Eurozone at the moment, the access to gambling, the access to ads and social media, I think that's a very, very scary figure. Gambling is surely on the rise, especially during a pandemic. We need to see regulations around the end of free bets. Many gambling companies are offering 10 off 30 free bets left, right and centre. Advertising around gambling is also a very serious issue. Fine Gael have taken steps in relation to alcohol control with minimum unit pricing. We've taken steps in relation to tobacco control and advertising, and I believe we need to do the same in relation to gambling. Many sports people endorse gambling products. It is a bigger issue in the UK, but it's certainly an issue here in Ireland as well. Currently, the problem of addictive gambling products, there is no issue with the watershed. Basically, you can advertise gambling products all day around, whereas there's issues with alcohol and tobacco. So kids are being exposed to the constant promotion of gambling products all day around. We also need to bring in spending limits, and I welcome the work that Senator Joe Riley has done. Joe has asked for €100 bet limits on gambling, and I do commend the work he's done on that. I believe that age verification for mobile gambling also needs to be a stricter control around it, because it is too easy to bet and gamble, and we all know instances of that. Joe Riley also hosted a webinar which was very well attended, and I think it opened people's eyes to the issue of gambling in Ireland. The other issue that Joe has spoken about too in relation to gambling is that we need to have warning on gambling products. If you look at again what they've done with tobacco, maybe we need to look at that in relation to gambling products. The gambling control regulator is in the programme for government, and delegates, I would ask for your support on this motion. Thank you.
At least I only did it once. I had myself on mute there. Thank you so much, Brendan. I think this motion is so important. It's a core part of the programme for government. I completely support it. And there's just so many different types of gambling now, whether I learned this week about, gambling on the lotto, which I hadn't realised is sort of a secondary, and all from the phone. And it's just, it's a dangerous thing for children, and, appropriate controls are really important. And I also say, Brendan, happy birthday. I believe it's your 40th birthday party tonight, so happy birthday for you from everybody in Fine Gael. But before we finish up on this motion, could I ask Councillor Daniel Butler to come in on this, please, and give us your perspective, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm delighted to come in, and I commend Brendan, and happy birthday, Brendan. Nicely embarrassed there by Jennifer, so you got a dose of embarrassment for your 40th. But yeah, look, this is a very, very important motion. There's no doubt about it. My work previously has been in addiction treatments, and I've seen the devastation and impact that gambling can have on individuals and families, and indeed communities, and it's not to be underplayed. But also, what we often forget about is often gambling goes hand in hand with substance misuse as well, because of the stress associated with it. People will often turn to alcohol, and if you need to look at our streets, you'll always see a pub and a betting office side by side. It's a reality. But I think one of the key issues there that you touched on, Brendan, that's of huge importance, is young people. In Ireland, 10% of adults are seen to use excessive gambling. It's 14% amongst young people. So we have a particular problem with young people. And as you've stated, the age verification online is very, very poor. It's very easy to bypass it and to register an account and gamble online. So there's definitely no doubt that we have a very, very serious issue. And it's not just associated with sport as well. I think it's important to note that gambling, often people feel like gambling is like an addition to sport, another way of enjoying sport. But you can see during COVID, when we had very little sport on, there actually a huge amount of gambling. Initially, there was a lull, but then quite quickly, people moved their gambling away from sport and into the casino-type sports, casino-type gambling. So it's a particular compulsion. It's a particular type of addiction that requires a very specific and targeted approach. And I think this bill, and it's been properly staffed, could benefit our society hugely, and potentially save lives, because those that are engaged in gambling, 1 in 5 when they turn to problematic use, take their lives, or at least attempt to take their lives. So it's a particularly vulnerable group in our society, and like you say, it has impact on families and communities. So I commend the motion.
Thank you very much. And I'll ask delegates to vote on that now, please. Can I just reference a couple of important questions that have come in from Caoimhe Liffey in relation to victims of sexual assault in front of the courts, about having a separate system so that they don't have to face the perpetrator, which can be very traumatic. Just to flag that the Justice Committee looked at that, and that's part of our report it won't be a surprise because it was part of, it was discussed so thoroughly at the Justice Committee recently. So that's just to acknowledge that that's happening. And also a question from in relation to family law about it taking so long. And I think we've covered that with Hildegard. And just in the interest of time, I'll keep going with the motions, but I did just want to acknowledge those questions coming in. So please vote. An update on past motions. Motion 8.3 in relation to the Citizens' Assembly and gender equality passed by 93%, which is great. And if we can achieve anything close to that at the referendums, which must flow from that body of work, then we'll be having a good day. Can I come to our last motion then, please? From the Fine Gael Intercultural Group, and I'm going to ask the wonderful councillor Yemi Adenunga to propose that, please.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Ministers, deputies, councillors, members, I am Yemi Adenunga, Fine Gael councillor in Navan Municipal District, Meath County Council, and I am co-chair of Fine Gael Intercultural. I know this might be the last but not the least motion for today. It's been a brilliant day, and so I'll try and keep it brief. I'm proposing this motion on behalf of Fine Gael Intercultural, requesting that this Odesh calls on the government to recognize the importance and the value of listening to the voices of migrant communities in Ireland by ensuring that the selection criteria for future citizen assemblies better reflects the diversity of the now multicultural and modern Ireland, and to include persons eligible to vote in local and European elections, as well as Dáil elections. Currently, membership of the Citizens' Assembly consists of 100 persons, comprising a chairperson and 99 citizens entitled to vote at a referendum. Under Part 2 of the Electoral Act 1992, every person is entitled to be entered on the register of elections if they have reached the age of 18 years and are ordinarily resident in a constituency and local electoral area in the state. These criteria of people, however, as categories of people, however, cannot vote in a referendum if they are not Irish citizens, either by birth or naturalization, even though they are residents in the state. No matter how important the referendum is to them or how it impacts them, they cannot vote on it. This, by extension, means that every migrant, whether from the EU or countries outside the EU, resident in Ireland, but who is not an Irish citizen, is not eligible to take part in the Citizens' Assembly, where various issues that also impact them and could even be about them are discussed, but without them at the table to share their experiences and insights and to add perspective to the recommendations of the Assembly. Let's quickly put this in perspective. An example, according to the CSO in 2020 report compiled during the COVID-19 pandemic and released in August 2020, of the 85,400 people who migrated to Ireland in the year 2019 leading up to April 2020, 28,900 of them, that is about 33% of the total, were citizens of Ireland abroad who immigrated back home. They are eligible to participate in the Citizens' Assembly, even though they just moved back to Ireland after years of being abroad. The remaining 56,500 who are migrants from EU and outside EU and who are residents in the country do not meet the criteria to participate in the Citizens' Assembly and therefore cannot participate or make recommendations on any of the issues discussed, some of which may be about them at such a highly important gathering. Once again, recommendations that will lead to decisions will be made about them without them. Take a look at the last Citizens' Assembly. How many migrants are represented in the Assembly? Your guess is as good as mine. While the recent Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality, in the course of its work, heard important testimonies from representatives of women in various communities, including minority groups, migrant women. The migrant women were involved to gather statistics. They are not part of recommendations made by the Assembly. That is not reflective of the Ireland of today. In ensuring that migrants have a sense of belonging, enabling a place at our Citizens' Assembly of Migrants would be a good place to start. I therefore call on this Odesh on behalf of Fine Gael Intercultural to call on the government to recognize the importance and value of not just listening to the voices of migrant communities in Ireland, but also to include them in the membership of the Assembly who put forward recommendation. This can be done by ensuring that the selection criteria for the future Citizens' Assembly better reflects the diversity of a now multicultural and modern Ireland, and to include persons eligible to vote in local and European elections, as well as the Dáil elections. In so doing, we don't restrict ourselves to having a narrow, legalistic vision of what our citizens are. Fine Gael is a party of the progressive centre. That means we act in a way that is right for Ireland, regardless of dogma or ideology. We base our policies and ideas for the future of Ireland on our core beliefs. What is right for the future of Ireland is that we make it the one that recognizes and listens to the voice of all in the state at all levels. We must reflect the modern, multicultural Ireland that we are now in, giving everyone an opportunity to not just use their voices and be heard, but also to be able to recommend on issues. Thank you, and I hope you vote on this issue.
Thank you, Yemi, and thank you for all your work on the Fine Gael Intercultural Group. I was saying on the session on Wednesday night, it was the most enjoyable thing I've been involved in with Fine Gael since my election. We had a brilliant night, Friday night, speaking with that group, and it was so productive and so constructive. So thank you so much for all of your work on that. Could I also ask, yes, exactly, I see Molly clapping there, quite right. Could I also ask Alex Ocean-Lloyd, please, to speak to the motion, please? Are you there, Alex? Hi.
Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Alexander Oshunloye, Equality Officer, Dublin Fingal Constituency from Michael Collins, Barbergan branch. I'm happy to second this motion and call on Fine Gael in government to let the polity look more like Ireland of today. Just to add context to what Councillor Yemi just said there, there's a lot of talent, energy and zest within the migrant community. The government has to tap into it. The more representation they get, the more engaged they will be. It's a win for Ireland. So I call on Fine Gael through government, through this Adesh, to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. And, you know, I was just thinking as you were both speaking how when Fine Gael and Enda Kenny introduced the concept of the Citizen Assembly at the first instance, it was a new concept, you know, designed to tackle issues that, you know, had been historically sort of left to the side. And it was a way of really engaging debate. And it was designed just the way it was. But you know, so much has changed, so much has evolved. We continue to learn, we continue to get better at the way that we do things. We can constantly improve our processes. We want to be more inclusive. So there's so much in this motion that really speaks to that, rather than, I think, as you said, Yemi, an overly legalistic and overly narrow conception of who should be contributing to that. So maybe it's not a citizens' assembly, maybe it's something a bit more inclusive than that, and recognizing how many people are applying for citizenship and who want to be Irish citizens and want to be, you know, here in every possible way. So there's something really interesting about how we thought about citizens' assemblies and how that can continue to evolve. So there's so much to do. So I would ask you to vote, please. And meanwhile, let me just give you the result of motion 8.4 on from Brendan Travers on gambling, and it was passed by 95.3%. So we really are a group united today. It's fantastic. And the last motion there, could I just I'm being asked now, because we're coming up to 4:04 when the next session begins, so I'm being asked to wrap up. I hope that the next contributor, the next session, will give you the update on this final vote, unless somebody gets it to me super fast. Could I just have a word from Heather Humphreys, from Minister for Justice Heather Humphreys, just to close us up?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for a really all the participants for a really interesting session, and it's been great to hear your views. And I look forward to engaging with you at different occasions over the next number of months as Minister for Justice, and then continue on with my normal engagement with the membership as Minister for Social Protection and Rural and Community Development. So I want to wish you all well, and thanks again, Jennifer, for what has been a really beneficial and informative session.
Thanks so much, Heather. And Hildegard, could we just hear from you to wrap up our session?
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you to everybody who's contributed. I think this is really important, like the feedback through we have policy labs within the parliamentary party, but this engagement to these motions and discussing it and having an opportunity, I think doing it online. I know we're a little bit constrained, but I think it has opened up our audience a little more to give us feedback, and that's how we draft and create good policy. And it kind of speaks to what Yemi is saying as well. It's hearing from all voices, all views. We're all in this society together, and it's through listening to views that we might not agree with to get to understand where other people are coming from. I think that forms a more inclusive society, and one where there's more empathy. And I think more of this, and I think it's been very, very productive. And thank you, Jennifer, in the way you chaired it and brought everyone in, and our branch membership right across the country who fed into this process. So more of this, and it will help Fine Gael to put in place good policy and ensure that we are that inclusive, open party as we have demonstrated in the past. And we need to constantly ensure that we're always attuned to that and ensuring that we are listening to all views and trying to create best policy to affect positive change for everybody in our society. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hildegard, and thank you, everybody. We're going to have a 5-minute break, but before we go, I just want to tell you that we have we've done really well today. We've just passed that last motion, 90% in favour. So it just goes to show Fine Gael is equality, about equality in every aspect of it. You cannot pick your equalities. Equality on gender, equality on sexual orientation, equality on intercultural. Fine Gael is a party of equality, and we're going to stay that way. And thanks, everybody. There's going to be a 5-minute break before the next session. Thank you all for your contribution and your work. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.